Sit down, Cripple. The blond kid's voice cut through the diner like a knife. He shoved the man on crutches so hard that the Marine's body slammed into a table, sending plates crashing to the floor. Nobody moved. Nobody said a word. A decorated soldier who gave his leg for this country was lying on a dirty diner floor, while two rich teenagers stood over him laughing. But what those boys didn't know was that the exhausted woman sitting in the corner booth, the one with dark circles under her eyes and coffee-stained scrubs, was about to change their lives forever. If this story moves you, subscribe to our channel and stay until the very end. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from so we can see how far this story travels. The phone call came at 6:47 in the morning. Daniel Brooks was sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at the place where his left leg used to be. He did this every morning, not out of self-pity, not anymore. It was more like a ritual, a way of reminding himself that he was still here, that the leg was gone, but the man was not. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. "Danny?" The voice on the other end was his mother's. Tight, controlled, the way she always sounded when she was trying not to cry. "Hey, Ma. Are you eating?" "I'm about to." "Real food, Daniel, not that protein bar nonsense." He almost smiled. "Yes, Ma. Real food. There's a diner on 5th and Monroe, Grayson's. You remember it?" He did. His father used to take him there on Saturday mornings before everything fell apart. Before the divorce, before the enlistment, before Fallujah. "I remember. Go there today. Get the pancakes. They still make them the same way." Daniel closed his eyes. His mother had been doing this for months now, finding small ways to pull him back into the world. A diner, pancakes, as if breakfast could fix what was broken. "I'll think about it." "Don't think about it, just go." He hung up and sat there for a long time. The apartment was quiet. It was always quiet. That was the hardest part, not the phantom pain in a leg that no longer existed, not the nightmares, not the stares from strangers on the street. It was the silence. In the Marines, there was always noise, orders being shouted, helicopters overhead, brothers laughing about something stupid at 0300 because none of them could sleep. Now there was nothing. He reached for his crutches and pulled himself up. The prosthetic was leaning against the wall near the closet, but he hadn't worn it in 3 days. The socket didn't fit right anymore. His residual limb had lost more volume, and the VA had scheduled a refitting, but the appointment wasn't for another 2 weeks. So crutches it was. Daniel caught his reflection in the bathroom mirror. 31 years old, he looked 45. His jaw was covered in a week's worth of stubble. His eyes had that hollowed-out look that civilians never understood, but every veteran recognized instantly. He splashed water on his face and pulled on a clean flannel shirt. His old USMC cap sat on the shelf by the door. He grabbed it without thinking the way he always did. It wasn't about pride, it was about identity. Without the core, he wasn't sure who he was anymore. The walk to Grayson's took 20 minutes. It should have taken 8, but the crutches slowed him down, and twice he had to stop to catch his breath. A woman pushing a stroller crossed to the other side of the street when she saw him coming. She probably didn't even realize she'd done it. People never did. Grayson's diner sat on the corner of 5th and Monroe exactly the way he remembered it. The same faded awning, the same neon open sign flickering in the window. The bell above the door jingled when he pushed it open, and for one brief second, Daniel was 8 years old again, holding his father's hand asking for extra whipped cream on his pancakes. Then the moment passed. The diner was busy. Nearly every booth was occupied, and a line of customers stood near the register, waiting for takeout. Daniel scanned the room for an open seat. There was one booth near the back, empty, but the path to it was narrow, weaving between tables and chairs that had been pulled out at careless angles. He started making his way through. The first thing he noticed was the laughter. Not the warm, easy kind. This was sharp, performative. The kind of laughter designed to make sure everyone in the room heard it. 2 boys sat in a booth near the center of the diner, 17, maybe 18 years old. One was blonde with a jawline that looked like it had been sculpted by money and good genetics. He wore a polo shirt with the collar popped and a watch on his wrist that cost more than Daniel's monthly disability check. The other was dark-haired, broader, with the lazy confidence of someone who had never been told no in his entire life. They were loud, obnoxiously loud, talking about a party from the night before, about some girl named Megan, about the new BMW the blonde kid's father had just bought him. Daniel didn't pay them any attention. He just needed to get to the booth in the back. But as he passed their table, his left crutch caught the edge of a chair. He stumbled. Not badly, he caught himself almost immediately, his arms strong from months of bearing his full weight. But the stumble was enough. The blonde kid looked up and smiled. "Whoa," the kid said, loud enough for half the diner to hear. "Careful there, buddy. Wouldn't want you to fall and lose your other leg." The dark-haired boy burst out laughing. Daniel's grip tightened on his crutches. He didn't look at them. He kept moving. 1 step, 2 steps, almost there. Hey, I'm talking to you," but Daniel didn't stop. "What are you deaf to?" More laughter. The blondie kid nudged his friend and raised his voice another notch. "Yo, check it out. G.I. Joe forgot his leg at home." Something cold settled in Daniel's chest, not anger. He'd burned through anger a long time ago. This was something else, something heavier. It was the weight of realizing that this kid, this child who had never sacrificed anything in his privileged life, saw him as entertainment. He reached the booth and sat down. It took effort. He had to position the crutches carefully, slide into the seat at the right angle. He'd practiced the mechanics 1,000 times, but it never felt natural. Not in public, not when he could feel eyes on him. The waitress came over. She was a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a name tag that read Linda. "What can I get you, huh? Pancakes and coffee, black." Linda nodded and walked away. Daniel pulled out his phone, not to look at anything, just to have something to do with his hands. A barrier between himself and the rest of the room. But the boys wouldn't let it go. "Bet he stepped on a mine because he wasn't looking where he was going," the dark-haired one said, not even bothering to whisper. "Nah," the blonde one replied. "Probably tripped over his own feet. Oh, wait, foot, singular." They laughed so hard, the dark-haired one slapped the table. Daniel's jaw clenched. He stared at his phone screen. The words on it blurred. He wasn't reading. He was holding himself together. A man in the next booth over glanced at Daniel, then looked away. A couple near the window exchanged uncomfortable looks, but said nothing. Linda, the waitress, paused for a moment on her way to the kitchen, her mouth tight, but she kept walking. Nobody said a word. This was the part that always hurt the most. Not the cruelty itself, but the silence around it. The collective agreement of an entire room to pretend it wasn't happening. Daniel had been through worse. He told himself that. He had been through firefights in Fallujah, through the blast that took his leg, through 12 surgeries and 8 months of rehabilitation at Walter Reed. He had screamed into his pillow at night and learned to walk again on a piece of titanium and carbon fiber. He could handle 2 stupid kids in a diner. But then the blonde one stood up. He walked over to Daniel's booth, casual as anything, like he was strolling through a mall. His friend followed, arms crossed, smirking. "Hey, soldier boy." The blonde kid leaned against the edge of the booth. "My buddy and I were just wondering something." Daniel looked up. He met the kid's eyes for the first time. They were blue, clear, completely empty of empathy. "What's it like?" the kid asked. "Being half a person." The diner went quiet, not the gradual quiet of conversations trailing off. This was instant, complete. Every person in that room heard what the boy said, and every single one of them froze. Daniel's hands were trembling, not from fear, from the effort of keeping them still, from the effort of not reaching across the table and teaching this child a lesson that his parents had clearly never bothered to. "Walk away," Daniel said. His voice was low, steady, the voice of a man who had given orders under fire. The blonde kid tilted his head. "Or what? You gonna chase me on one leg?" The dark-haired one howled with laughter. Something cracked in Daniel's chest, not his resolve. Something deeper, something that had been holding for months, maybe years. The quiet hope that the world he'd fought for might actually be worth the sacrifice. "I serve this country," Daniel said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I gave my leg so that people like you could sit in a diner and eat your breakfast in peace. The least you could do is show some basic human decency." The blonde kid stared at him. For 1 second, just one, something flickered behind those empty, blue eyes. Maybe it was shame. Maybe it was recognition. Maybe it was the beginning of understanding. Then he laughed. "That's adorable," the kid said. "Did they teach you that speech in the Army, Marines? Whatever, same thing. It was not the same thing. Every Marine who ever lived knew it was not the same thing, but Daniel didn't correct him again. There was no point. You couldn't educate someone who didn't want to learn. Come on, Daniel said quietly, just leave me alone. The blond kid looked at his friend. Some unspoken communication passed between them, the kind of wordless agreement that precedes every act of cruelty committed by people who operate in packs. Then the kid reached down and grabbed one of Daniel's crutches. Give that back. What this, oh? The kid held it up like a trophy. Why you need it? That's kind of pathetic, don't you think? Give it back, now, make me. Daniel reached for the crutch. The movement shifted his weight, and without the second point of support, his balance faltered. The blond kid saw the opening. He pulled the crutch away sharply, and Daniel, already off balance, pitched forward out of the booth. He hit the floor hard. His hands broke the fall, but his chin clipped the edge of the table on the way down. Pain exploded through his jaw. His cap flew off his head and skidded across the linoleum. The dark-haired kid doubled over laughing. The blond kid dropped the crutch on the floor next to Daniel like tossing a bone to a dog. Sit down, Cripple, he said. Oh, wait, you already are. The diner was completely silent. 40 people, maybe more. Every one of them watching a disabled Marine lying on a dirty floor, while two teenagers stood over him like conquerors. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Not the businessman in the corner pretending to read his newspaper. Not the mother shielding her child's eyes. Not the construction workers at the counter who could have ended this in 30 seconds. Not Linda, the waitress who stood behind the register with her hand over her mouth and tears forming in her eyes. Daniel lay there, his cheek pressed against the cold linoleum. Coffee from a spilled cup was pooling near his hand. His USMC cap was 3 feet away upside down like a beggar's bowl. He closed his eyes. This was it. This was what he'd come home to. Not a hero's welcome. Not gratitude. Not even indifference. This. Two kids who saw his sacrifice as a joke. A room full of adults who saw it happening and chose their comfort over his dignity. Maybe his mother was wrong. Maybe pancakes couldn't fix anything. He started to push himself up. His arms were shaking, not from weakness, from something worse. From the realization that he was completely, utterly alone in a room full of people. And that was when a chair scraped against the floor. It was a small sound, metal legs dragging across linoleum. But in the suffocating silence of that diner, it sounded like a gunshot. Every head turned. She stood up slowly, not dramatically, not like someone making a statement. She rose the way a person rises when they've simply had enough, when something inside them shifts from tolerance to action and there is no going back. She was still wearing her scrubs, faded blue stained with things she didn't want to think about. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail that had started the shift neat and was now falling apart. There were dark circles under her eyes so deep they looked like bruises. Her hospital ID badge was still clipped to her chest. It read, Sarah Mitchell, RNICU. She had been sitting in the corner booth for 17 minutes. She'd ordered a cup of coffee and a turkey sandwich, but the coffee had gone cold and the sandwich was untouched. She'd come straight from the hospital from a 31-hour shift in the intensive care unit where she'd lost 2 patients. The first was an elderly woman named Ruth who had held Sarah's hand and whispered her grandson's name as she died. The second was a 19-year-old motorcycle accident victim whose parents had arrived too late to say goodbye. Sarah was running on adrenaline and grief and 3 cups of hospital coffee. She should have been in bed. She should have been anywhere but here. But the diner was on her way home, and she needed to sit somewhere that wasn't under fluorescent lights, somewhere that didn't smell like antiseptic and death. Instead, she'd walked into this. She'd watched the whole thing, every word, every laugh, every second of that Marine's humiliation, and she'd watched the room do nothing. She knew what it felt like to serve. Before nursing, Sarah had been a combat medic with the 101st Airborne. She'd spent 14 months in Afghanistan pulling soldiers out of wreckage and packing wounds with gauze while bullets snapped overhead. She'd held dying men in her arms and lied to them, told them they were going to be fine, told them to stay awake, told them their mothers were waiting for them, anything to keep them fighting for 1 more minute. She knew what that man on the floor had given. She knew what it cost, and she was watching. Sarah walked toward the center of the diner. Her footsteps were measured, deliberate, not fast, not slow. The walk of someone who has assessed a situation and made a decision. The blonde kid saw her coming and grinned. "Oh, great," he said to his friend. "Here comes Florence Nightingale." Sarah didn't respond. She walked past the boys, knelt down beside Daniel, and extended her hand. "Marine," she said. Just that one word, not sir, not buddy, not are you okay? Just the thing he was, the thing no one in that room had acknowledged. Daniel looked up at Hisher. His eyes were wet, but the tears hadn't fallen. He wouldn't let them. Not here. He took her hand. She helped him up. It wasn't easy. She had to brace herself, plant her feet wide, and pull with her whole body. She was 5'6" and 130 pounds, and he was 6'2" and 200, but she'd lifted heavier men off battlefields. She got him upright. She retrieved his crutches. She picked up his cap, brushed it off, and handed it back to him. Daniel put the cap on. His hands were still shaking. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me," Sarah replied. "Thank yourself for not killing those kids, because I know you thought about it." Something that was almost a smile crossed Daniel's face. "I thought about it a lot. I know, I've been counting the reasons myself." She turned to face the boys. The blonde kid was still grinning, but something in his expression had shifted. There was uncertainty there now. This wasn't how the script was supposed to go. People weren't supposed to intervene. People were supposed to watch and do nothing. That was the whole point. "You done?" he said to Sarah, "because me and my buddy were having a conversation with Captain America here, and you're kind of interrupting." Sarah looked at him, really looked at him. She studied his face the way she studied a patient's chart, reading everything that was written there and everything that wasn't. "How old are you?" she asked. 18? Why you want to take me out?" The dark-haired kid snickered. 18, Sarah repeated. "Old enough to enlist, old enough to deploy, old enough to stand in 120-degree heat wearing 60 pounds of gear while people who've never met you try to kill you. Old enough to step on an IED and wake up in a hospital bed wondering where your leg went." She paused. "But you'll never know anything about that, will you?" The grin faltered. "Because you've never had to fight for anything," Sarah continued. Her voice was calm, clinical almost, the same tone she used when she was explaining a terminal diagnosis to a family. Clear, compassionate, devastating. "You've never been hungry. You've never been scared. You've never held someone while they died and pretended you weren't dying too. You sit here in your designer clothes with your daddy's credit card and you think that makes you powerful. But I want you to understand something." She took one step closer. "That man you just knocked to the floor, he is worth more than you will ever be. Not because of what he lost, because of what he gave. And you will spend the rest of your life trying to become half the man he already is." The diner was so quiet you could hear the coffee machine hissing behind the counter. The blonde kid's jaw tightened. The grin was gone now. In its place was something raw and ugly. His pride was wounded, and Sarah could see the danger in that. Wounded pride in a boy who had never been challenged was like a cornered animal, unpredictable. "You should sit down," the kid said. His voice had dropped. The performance was over. This was real now. "You should sit down and mind your own business before something happens." Is that a threat? It's advice. "Here's mine," Sarah said. "Apologize to him, right now, and then leave this diner before you embarrass yourselves any more than you already have." The kid stared at her. 3 seconds, 5, 10. Then he grabbed her wrist. His grip was hard. Harder than it needed to be. The kind of grip that said, "I can hurt you if I want to." "I said sit down." Sarah looked at his hand on her wrist. Then she looked at his eyes. She did not look away. "Let go of me," she said. Quiet, final. The last warning she would give. He squeezed tighter, and something clicked in Sarah Mitchell's brain. Not anger, not fear, training. 14 months of combat training, of hand-to-hand drills at 0500 of muscle memory, forged in places where hesitation meant death. Her free hand came up and locked onto the kid's wrist. She rotated her grip inward, applying pressure to the joint. At the same time, she stepped to the side, pulling him off balance. His elbow hyperextended and pain shot up his arm like electricity. He gasped and released her wrist instinctively. Sarah continued the motion, sweeping his foot and guiding him to the floor with controlled force. He landed on his back with a thud that shook the table next to him. The dark-haired kid's eyes went wide. For a full second, he just stood there processing what had happened. His friend, the leader, the alpha, The untouchable golden boy was on the floor gasping. Then anger took over. He rushed at Sarah. It was clumsy, predictable. He came in high, reaching for her shoulders the way someone fights when they've never actually been in a fight. Sarah sidestepped, caught his arm as it passed her, and used his own momentum against him. She pivoted, pulled, and directed him into the edge of the booth. He hit it chest first and crumpled to the floor next to his friend. Both boys were down. The whole thing had taken less than 8 seconds. Sarah stepped back. Her hands dropped to her sides. Her breathing was elevated but controlled. She wasn't shaking. She wasn't panicking. She was operating on the same calm focus that had carried her through firefights and trauma bays. She looked down at the 2 boys on the floor. Neither of them was seriously hurt. She'd made sure of that. Every movement had been calibrated. Enough force to neutralize, not enough to injure. The same principle she applied in the ICU: do what is necessary, nothing more. The blonde kid rolled over and stared up at her. His blue eyes were wide. The arrogance was gone. What was left was something Sarah recognized from the hospital. It was the look of someone who had just realized for the first time in their life that they were not invincible. For 10 seconds, nobody in the diner moved. Then from somewhere in the back, a single person started clapping. It spread, not to everyone. Maybe a third of the room. Scattered applause, hesitant at first, then gaining strength. The construction workers at the counter. A couple of college students near the window. Linda, the waitress, who was crying openly now, clapping with both hands above her head. But others didn't clap. Others looked away. Others shook their heads. A woman near the door pulled out her phone and started recording, not the boys, but Sarah. Because in their eyes, the nurse was the problem. The boys were just boys. Sarah was the one who had escalated. Sarah was the one who had used violence. Sarah was the one who would have to answer for this. Daniel stood by the booth, leaning on his crutches. His cap was straight on his head. His eyes were fixed on Sarah. "What's your name?" he asked. Sarah. "Daniel Brooks, Sergeant, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines." He extended his hand. She took it. "Sarah Mitchell, Specialist, 101st Airborne, former combat medic." His eyebrows rose. 101st, Screaming Eagles. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. The nod of one soldier to another, the acknowledgement that needed no words. Sirens cut through the air outside. Someone had called the police. Of course someone had. Not when 2 teenagers were tormenting a disabled veteran. Not when a man was knocked to the ground and humiliated. No, someone called when the woman stood up. Someone called when the balance of power shifted. 2 officers entered the diner, young, tense, hands near their belts. They scanned the room and saw exactly what the scene looked like from the outside: 2 teenagers on the floor and a woman standing over them. "Ma'am, step away from them," the first officer said. Sarah raised her hands slowly, palms open, visible. She knew the protocol. She knew how fast things could go wrong. "I'm a nurse," she said. "I was defending myself and this man. These 2 boys physically assaulted a disabled veteran and then grabbed my wrist when I intervened." The officer looked at Daniel, then at the boys who were now sitting up, looking dazed and very young. "Is that true, sir?" the officer asked Daniel. "Every word," Daniel said. "I'll testify to it." The blonde kid's face changed. The daze cleared and something calculating took its place. He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling my dad," he said. His voice was shaking, but there was a coldness underneath it. A promise. "You have no idea who you just messed with." Sarah looked at him. Exhaustion was settling into her bones now. The adrenaline was fading. She could feel the weight of 31 hours crashing down on her. But she held the kid's gaze. "I know exactly who I messed with," she said. "A bully. And I've been dealing with worse than you my entire life." The officer put his hand on her shoulder. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with us." Sarah didn't resist. She didn't argue. She let them lead her toward the door. As she passed Daniel, she paused. "Get the pancakes," she said. "They're worth it." Then the door closed behind her, and Sarah Mitchell, IQ nurse, combat veteran, the only person in a room of 40 who had found the courage to stand, was placed in the back of a squad car. Daniel watched through the window as the car pulled away. His coffee was cold. His chin was throbbing where it had hit the table. His hands were still trembling. But for the first time in months, the silence inside him felt different. It felt like the beginning of something. The holding cell smelled like bleach and regret. Sarah sat on the metal bench with her back against the wall, her hands resting on her knees. Her scrubs were wrinkled. Her ponytail had completely fallen apart, and her dark hair hung around her face in tangled strands. She could still feel the ghost of the blonde kid's grip on her wrist. She could still hear the sound of Daniel's body hitting the floor. She closed her eyes and counted her breaths. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. The same technique she'd taught herself in Afghanistan when the mortars came at night and sleep was impossible. A corrections officer walked past the cell without looking at her. "Excuse me," Sarah said. "I get a phone call." The officer kept walking. "Hey." Sarah's voice sharpened. "I have a right to a phone call." He stopped, turned, looked at her the way people look at an inconvenience. "You'll get your call when processing is done." "When is that?" "When it's done, Beon." He walked away. Sarah leaned her head back against the wall. The fluorescent light above her buzzed with a frequency that vibrated behind her eyes. She hadn't slept in 34 hours. Her body was shutting down. She could feel it in the heaviness of her limbs, in the fog creeping into the edges of her thoughts. But her mind wouldn't have stopped replaying the diner. The kid's hand on her wrist, the calculated cruelty in his eyes, the way the whole room had watched a man suffer and done absolutely nothing. She'd do it again. She knew that without hesitation. Given the same moment, the same choice, she would stand up every single time. But knowing you did the right thing and paying the price for it were two very different things. 3 hours passed. They finally let her make a call. She stood at the payphone mounted on the wall receiver pressed to her ear, listening to it ring. She'd called the only number she could remember by heart. "Hello? Mom, it's me." Silence, then a sharp intake of breath. "Sarah, why are you calling from a number I don't recognize? What happened?" "I'm at the county jail." "You're where? I got arrested." Oh my God, Sarah, what did you do?" "I defended a man who couldn't defend himself." Her mother's voice cracked. "What does that mean? Are you hurt? Did someone hurt you?" "I'm fine, Mom, I'm fine, but I need a lawyer. I can't afford one. And the public defender won't be available until Monday." "It's Saturday, Sarah. You're going to sit in jail until Monday, unless I can post bail." "How much?" Sarah swallowed. "They set it at $5,000. $5,000 for what? What are they charging you with?" "Assault." The word hung in the air between them like smoke. "Assault," her mother repeated. "My daughter, the nurse, the girl who spent her whole life helping people. Assault." "Mom, I can explain everything, but not right now. Do you have the money?" The pause that followed told Sarah everything she needed to know. Her mother was a retired school teacher living on a fixed income in a 2-bedroom apartment in New Jersey. $5,000 might as well have been $5 million. "I'll figure it out," her mother said. "Give me a few hours." "Mom, don't do anything crazy. Don't tell me what to do. You're in jail. I'll do whatever I have to." The line went dead. Sarah hung up the phone and pressed her forehead against the cold metal of the wall. She stayed there for a long time. Meanwhile, across town, Daniel Brooks was sitting in a different kind of prison. His apartment. His quiet, suffocating apartment with its bare walls and its empty rooms and its silence that pressed down on him like a weight. He'd left the diner an hour after Sarah was taken away. Linda, the waitress, had brought him the pancakes on the house, but he couldn't eat. He'd sat there staring at the plate while the syrup congealed and the coffee went cold, replaying the whole thing in his head. She'd called him Marine. Not sir, not buddy, not poor thing. Marine, like she saw him, like she actually saw him. And now she was in jail for it. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in 2 years. "Brooks." The voice on the other end was gravel and authority. Master Sergeant Tom Rivera retired, the man who had been Daniel's squad leader in Fallujah. The man who had carried Daniel half a mile through hostile territory after the IED blast tourniquet cinched around what was left of his leg, screaming at him to stay awake. "Sarge, it's Danny." "Danny Brooks, I'll be damned. I thought you fell off the face of the earth." "I kinda did." "You okay?" "No, but that's not why I'm calling." Daniel told him everything. The diner, the boys, Sarah, the arrest, all of it. Rivera was quiet for a long moment. "What's her name again?" "Sarah Mitchell. She said she was 101st Airborne. Combat medic." Screaming Eagles, Rivera murmured. That's a hard unit. If she served with them, she's the real deal. She's in county lockup right now, Sarge. She stood up for me, and they put her in a cell. Do you have bail information? 5,000? I don't have it. I do. Daniel blinked. Sarge, I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm telling. Give me the details. I'll have her out by tonight. Daniel's throat tightened. He gave Rivera the information, and when he hung up, he sat there holding the phone against his chest like it was something precious. For 2 years, he'd cut himself off from everyone who cared about him. He'd told himself he was protecting them from his darkness. But the truth was simpler and uglier than that. He'd been ashamed. Ashamed of the crutches and the missing leg and the nightmares and the fact that he couldn't even walk into a diner without becoming someone's target. Sarah Mitchell had changed something today. He didn't know what yet, but something had shifted. At 6:42 that evening, the cell door opened and a guard told Sarah she'd been bailed out. She walked through processing in a daze. They returned her phone, her wallet, her hospital ID badge. She signed papers without reading them. When she stepped through the front door of the county jail into the evening air, she expected to see her mother. Instead, she saw a man she'd never met. He was in his 50s, stocky with a silver crew cut and a bearing that screamed military. He was leaning against a pickup truck with a Marine Corps bumper sticker on the tailgate. Sarah Mitchell. Who are you? Tom Rivera, Master Sergeant retired, 3rd Battalion 1st Marines. I served with Danny Brooks. Sarah stared at him. You posted my bail. I did. Why play? Rivera uncrossed his arms and looked at her. Because I spent 22 years in the Corps watching good people get punished for doing the right thing. And I'm too old and too angry to let it happen one more time. Sarah didn't cry. She wanted to. Every cell in her body was begging for the release. But she had trained herself out of crying a long time ago, somewhere between her first firefight and her 100th code blue. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me yet. We've got a problem. What kind of problem? Rivera pulled out his phone and showed her a news article. The headline made her stomach drop. Nurse assaults 2 teenagers in unprovoked attack at local diner. Sarah read it twice. Her hands started shaking. That's not what happened. I know it's not. Danny told me everything, but this is what's out there right now, and it gets worse. He scrolled down. There was a quote from a man named Victor Hale. Sarah didn't recognize the name, but the photo showed a man in his early 50s, silver-haired, expensive suit, standing behind a podium at what looked like a political fundraiser. Victor Hale, Rivera said, real estate developer, net worth somewhere north of $300 million, board member of the city council, major donor to the governor's campaign, and father of the blonde kid you put on the floor. The ground tilted under Sarah's feet. His name is Chad Hale, Rivera continued. 18 years old, senior at Weston Prep, never been told no, never been held accountable, and his daddy has spent $300 million making sure it stays that way. Sarah's mind raced. She thought about the kid's face when he'd grabbed her wrist, the entitlement, the absolute certainty that he was untouchable. He wasn't wrong, he was untouchable, and Sarah had just touched him. What is Hale saying, she asked. He held a press conference 2 hours ago, said his son was the victim, said you attacked 2 innocent teenagers without provocation. He's demanding you be charged with felony assault. He's talking about pressing civil charges, and he's calling for your nursing license to be revoked. Every word landed like a body blow. My nursing license. He's already made calls to the state board. Sarah braced her hand against the truck. The exhaustion and the hunger and the fear all hit her at once, a wave she couldn't outrun. I have a recording, she whispered. Rivera's eyes sharpened. What? There was a woman in the diner near the door. She was recording on her phone. I saw her. If that footage existed, it shows everything. The boys harassing Danielle, the kid pulling his crutch away, the kid knocking him down, the kid grabbing my wrist first. Do you know who she is? No. Rivera nodded slowly. Then we find her, because right now Victor Hale is controlling the story, and if we don't change that fast, you're going to lose a lot more than your job. Sarah looked at him. I've lost things before. Not like this. He opened the passenger door of the truck. Get in, Danny's waiting, and I've got someone I want you to meet. Sarah hesitated. She'd spent the last 6 years relying on no one but herself. After Afghanistan, after the discharge, after the divorce, she never talked about she'd built her life on a simple principle. Trust yourself, carry your own weight, don't depend on anyone. Depending on people got you hurt. Depending on people got you left behind. But she was too tired to drive, too tired to fight, too tired to pretend she could handle this alone. She got in the truck. They drove in silence for 20 minutes. Sarah watched the streetlights slide past the window and felt the day catching up with her. 37 hours without sleep. 2 patients lost, a diner, a fight, a jail cell. And now a man worth $300 million wanted to destroy her life because she'd put his son on the floor. She wondered what Ruth would say. Ruth, the elderly woman who had died that morning in the ICU, holding Sarah's hand, whispering her grandson's name. Ruth had told Sarah something during one of her lucid moments 3 days before the end. The world is full of people who watch, Ruth had said, and it's full of people who act. The watchers live longer, but the ones who act are the only ones who really live. Sarah had written it down in her notebook. She kept a notebook of last words. It was morbid, she knew that, but there was wisdom in the things people said when they had nothing left to lose. Rivera pulled into the parking lot of a VFW hall on the west side of town. The sign was weathered, the paint peeling, but the American flag out front was crisp and bright spotlit from below. Daniel was waiting by the entrance. He'd changed his shirt and shaved. His crutches were tucked under his arms, but he stood straighter now. Something in his posture had changed since the diner. Sarah, he said her name like it meant something. Daniel, I'm sorry about all of this. Don't apologize, you didn't do anything wrong. Neither did you, that's kind of the point. They looked at each other for a moment. 2 veterans, 2 people who understood sacrifice and its cost. 2 people who had been failed by the world they'd fought to protect. Rivera led them inside. The VFW hall was mostly empty, just a few old-timers playing cards in the corner and a bartender wiping down the counter. But at a table near the back, a woman was waiting. She was Asian American, mid-30s, sharp-featured, with wire-rimmed glasses and a briefcase that looked like it had seen 100 courtrooms. She stood when they approached and extended her hand. Sarah Mitchell, I'm Jessica Chen, I'm an attorney. Sarah shook her hand. I can't afford an attorney. I'm not asking you to pay me. Then why are you here? Jessica sat down and opened her briefcase. Because 6 years ago, I was a JAG officer stationed at Fort Campbell. I worked with the 101st. I handled cases for soldiers who got railroaded by the system. Good people who did the right thing and got punished for it because the wrong person had the right connections. She pulled out a legal pad covered in handwritten notes. Tom called me 3 hours ago and told me what happened. I've already pulled the police report. I've read the news articles. And I've done a preliminary background check on Victor Hale and his son. And Jessica looked at her over the top of her glasses. Chad Hale has had 3 prior incidents. A fight at school that was swept under the rug, a DUI that was dismissed when the arresting officer was suddenly transferred to a different precinct, and a harassment complaint filed by a female classmate that was withdrawn after the girl's family received what I suspect was a significant financial settlement. Sarah's stomach turned. He's done this before. He's been doing this his whole life, and every time his father makes it go away, they're going to try to make you go away too. What are my options? Jessica set down her pen and folded her hands. The honest answer, they're limited. Victor Hale has resources, he has political connections. He has a PR team that is already shaping the narrative. If we play defense, we lose. We don't have the money or the influence to match him in a straight fight. So what do? We don't play defense. Jessica's eyes were steady. We play offense. We find the video. We find other people those boys have hurt. We build a case that is so public and so damning that Victor Hale can't make it disappear with a phone call and a check. Rivera leaned forward. I've already reached out to my network, veterans groups, Marine Corps League, VFW chapters. There are a lot of people who are going to be very angry when they hear what happened to Danny. And I'll testify, Daniel said. I'll stand in front of any camera, any judge, any jury, and I'll tell them exactly what those kids did and exactly what Sarah did to stop it. Sarah looked around the table. 3 people she hadn't known 12 hours ago. A retired Marine, a veteran lawyer, a wounded soldier, all of them ready to fight for her. Why, she asked. The question came out before she could stop it. Why do any of you care? Rivera answered first. Because we're tired of watching the wrong people win. Jessica nodded. Because the law is supposed to protect people like you, not punish you. Daniel was last. He looked at Sarah and his eyes held something she hadn't seen in a long time. Not pity, not gratitude. Recognition. Because this morning I was lying on a floor wondering why I survived Fallujah. And then you walked over and reminded me. Sarah's chest tightened. She pressed her lips together and breathed through it. The tears stayed where they were. Okay, she said. Where do we start? Jessica checked her watch. It's 8:15 on a Saturday night. Victor Hale's press conference aired at 4. The story has been running for 4 hours. In 4 more hours, it will be the dominant narrative. By tomorrow morning, every news outlet in the state will have it, and they'll all have Hale's version. So we have tonight. We have tonight. Sarah straightened in her chair. The exhaustion was still there, bone deep and relentless. But something else was rising underneath it. The same thing she'd felt in Afghanistan, when the helicopters wouldn't come, and the wounded kept arriving, and there was no option but to keep going. Purpose. I need the name of the woman who recorded the video, Sarah said, and I need to know if any of Chad Hale's previous victims are willing to talk. I'll start on the victims, Jessica said. The harassment complaint is public record. The girl's name is redacted, but I have contacts who can help. I'll work the veteran angle, Rivera said. By midnight, every VFW in the state will know what happened. And I'll find the woman with the video, Daniel said. They all looked at him. How? Rivera asked. Daniel pulled out his phone. I'm going to go back to the diner. Linda, the waitress, saw everything. She might know who the woman was. Danny, it's Saturday night. The diner might be closed. Then I'll knock until someone opens. Daniel's jaw was set. I spent 2 years sitting in my apartment feeling sorry for myself. I'm done sitting. Sarah watched him push himself up from the table, settle his crutches, and move toward the door. He didn't look back. He didn't hesitate. She thought about what Ruth had said. The watchers live longer, but the ones who act are the only ones who really live. Sarah turned to Jessica. One more thing. You said Hale is calling for my nursing license to be revoked. He is. How long do I have? The state board won't act immediately. They'll open an investigation. You'll have a hearing, but if Hale is pressuring them and he will be, the investigation could move fast. If I lose my license, I lose everything. Jessica didn't sugarcoat it. I know. Then we'd better not lose. Sarah pulled out her phone. She had 47 missed calls, 12 voicemails, her mother, the hospital, numbers she didn't recognize. She ignored all of them and opened her text messages. There was one from an unknown number sent 30 minutes ago. You should have stayed seated. Victor Hale does not forget, and he does not forgive. Sarah stared at the screen. Her heart rate spiked, but her hands were steady. She'd been threatened before, by insurgents, by patients' families, by ex-husbands who couldn't accept that she was stronger than they were. She screenshotted this message and slid the phone across the table to Jessica. Add this to the file. Jessica read the text. Her expression didn't change, but something hardened behind her eyes. They're trying to intimidate you. I know. Is it working? Sarah looked at her, looked at Rivera, thought about Daniel already on his way back to the diner, a man on crutches chasing justice through the dark. Not even close. Daniel made it back to Grayson's diner by 9:15. The lights were still on. The open sign still flickered in the window, though the place was nearly empty now. Just an old man nursing a cup of decaf in the corner and a young couple sharing a plate of fries by the jukebox. Linda was behind the counter wiping it down with the slow mechanical movements of someone running on autopilot. She looked up when the bell above the door jingled and her face changed the moment she recognized him. Oh, honey. She dropped the rag and came around the counter. Are you okay? I've been sick about it all day. I wanted to say something. I should have said something. I just froze. It's okay, Linda. It's not okay. I watched those boys do that to you and I just stood there like a coward. You're not a coward. Most people froze. That's human. Linda's eyes were red. She'd been crying maybe on and off all day. She wrung her hands in her apron and shook her head. That nurse, The one who helped you, I heard they arrested her. They did. She's out now, but she's in trouble, real trouble. That's not right. No, it's not. That's why I'm here. Daniel shifted his weight on the crutches and leaned against the counter. Linda, there was a woman in the diner this morning, near the door. She was recording on her phone. I need to know who she is. Linda's brow furrowed. She closed her eyes, replaying the morning in her mind. Recording? I remember a few people had their phones out after the nurse stepped in. This woman started recording before that. She was filming the boys. She might have the whole thing on video. Linda thought for a long moment, then her eyes opened wide. Margaret. Who tarry me? Margaret Ellis. She's a regular. Comes in every Saturday morning for the Eggs Benedict. She sits by the door because she likes to watch people walk past. She always has her phone out. She records everything. Her grandkids, the traffic, the weather. I've seen her record a squirrel eating a bagel for 5 straight minutes. Do you have her number? No, but I know where she lives. She's 2 blocks up on Maple, the yellow house with the wind chimes. She's been coming here for 12 years, never misses a Saturday. Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. Linda, you might have just saved someone's life. Go right now, and tell that nurse I'm sorry. Tell her I should have been braver. Daniel was out the door before she finished the sentence. The walk to Maple Street took 11 minutes. Every step hurt. His residual limb was swollen from a day of overuse, and the crutch pads were digging into his armpits hard enough to leave bruises. But he didn't slow down. He couldn't. The yellow house with the wind chimes was exactly where Linda said it would be. Daniel climbed the 3 porch steps one at a time, bracing himself on the railing, and knocked. 30 seconds passed. A minute. He knocked again. The door opened. A woman in her late 60s stood there in a bathrobe, reading glasses perched on her nose, a paperback novel in her hand. She looked at Daniel, then at his crutches, then at his USMC cap. Can I help you, Tual? Ma'am, my name is Daniel Brooks. I was in Grayson's diner this morning. Her expression changed instantly. The curiosity sharpened into recognition. Oh my Lord, you're the man, the soldier. Marine, ma'am. Marine, yes. I saw what happened to you. Those awful boys. She pressed her hand to her chest. Are you all right? I'm standing. That's something. Ma'am, I need to ask you a question, and it's important. Come in, please. I'd rather ask out here if that's okay. I don't have a lot of time. Margaret nodded. Go ahead. Were you recording this morning on your phone? Margaret's face went through 3 expressions in rapid succession. Surprise, guilt, fear. I was. Do you still have the footage? I do. Daniel's heart hammered. Ma'am, that video might be the only thing that can prove what really happened today. The nurse who helped me, Sarah Mitchell, she's been arrested. The father of one of those boys is a powerful man. He's telling the media she attacked his son without provocation. If your video shows the truth, it could save her career. It could save her life. Margaret clutched the door frame. Her hands were trembling. I didn't know what to do with it, she whispered. I watched those boys push you down, and I was so angry I just started recording. I got the whole thing, come on. All of it, the boys mocking you, the blonde one taking your crutch, you falling, the nurse standing up, everything. Everything, including the boy grabbing her wrist first. He grabbed her before she ever touched him. Daniel exhaled. The sound that came out of him was something between a laugh and a sob. Ma'am, I need that video. Margaret hesitated. The thing is, after I got home, I told my husband about it. He said I should delete it. He said Victor Hale is a dangerous man. He said if Hale finds out I have this footage, he'll make our lives miserable. Daniel's stomach dropped. Did you delete it? No. Margaret's chin lifted. I raised 3 sons and buried one. He was a Marine too. Corporal Brian Ellis, Helmand Province, 2010. The words hit Daniel like a wave. I did not delete it, Margaret said again. And I will not delete it. My son died fighting for what's right. I'm not going to spit on his grave by staying silent when I can do something. She pulled out her phone, unlocked it, and held it out. Take it. Take the whole phone if you need to. I'll get a new one. I just need the video, ma'am. Can you send it to me? They exchanged numbers. Margaret sent the video. Daniel watched it transfer, watched the progress bar crawl across the screen, and when it was done, he held his phone like it contained a grenade. Thank you, Margaret. Don't thank me. Just make sure the right people see it. Daniel called Sarah from the sidewalk. It was 9:53. I have it. Sarah was at the VFW hall with Jessica and Rivera. She put the phone on speaker. You have what? The video, all of it. 3 minutes and 47 seconds. It shows everything. The boys harassing me. The crutch being taken. Me on the floor. You standing up. The kid grabbing your wrist first. Everything. Jessica's voice cut in immediately. Daniel, do not share that video with anyone else. Not the media, not social media, no one. Send it to me directly. I need to preserve the chain of evidence. Sending it now. Jessica received the file at 9:56. She watched it 3 times in the back office of the VFW hall while Sarah sat outside with Rivera waiting. At 10:14, Jessica came out. She was trying to maintain her professional composure, but Sarah could see the fire behind her glasses. This changes everything. How taught Victor Hale told to the media his son was attacked without provocation. This video shows his son committing assault and battery against a disabled veteran, followed by unwanted physical contact with you. Chad Hale initiated every single moment of physical aggression. Your response was textbook self-defense. Any first-year law student could see it. Yeah, and so the charges get dropped. If the DA sees this video, yes, the charges don't just get dropped, they get reversed. Chad Hale should be the one facing charges. Rivera leaned forward. So we give it to the DA. We will, Monday morning. But here's the problem. Jessica pulled off her glasses and rubbed her eyes. Victor Hale has already shaped the narrative. The story that's out there right now is that a violent nurse attacked 2 innocent teenagers. Even if we get the charges dropped, the court of public opinion has already convicted Sarah. Her reputation is damaged. Her job is at risk. The state board is already reviewing her license. So we need the public to see the video too, Sarah said. We need the public to see the video first. The table went quiet. If we release this before Monday, Jessica continued, Victor Hale loses control of the story. The narrative flips. His son becomes the aggressor. He becomes the father who lied to protect a bully. And every media outlet that ran his version without verification will scramble to correct the record. And if Hale finds out we have it before we release it, Rivera asked, he'll try to suppress it. He'll get a judge to issue a temporary restraining order. He'll file an injunction claiming the video violates his son's privacy. He has the resources and the connections to make it happen. Then we release it tonight, Daniel said. Everyone looked at him. We release it tonight, right now, before he can stop us. Jessica held up her hand. Daniel, I need to advise against that from a legal standpoint. Why, Plum? Because if Sarah's case goes to trial, the defense could argue that releasing the video publicly tainted the jury pool. They could claim we were trying to manipulate public opinion. They're already manipulating public opinion, Sarah said. Hale held a press conference and lied to every camera in the state. He's manipulating right now. Jessica paused. She looked at Sarah for a long time. Then she looked at Daniel, then at Rivera. You're right, she said quietly. He is. So what do we do? Sarah asked. Jessica put her glasses back on. We don't release it ourselves. We give it to a journalist, someone credible, someone with enough reach to make it impossible to bury, but enough integrity that it can't be dismissed as a hit piece. Do you know someone like that? Rivera asked. I do, Rachel Torres, investigative reporter at Channel 8. She covered military justice cases for 3 years. She's tough, she's fair, and she doesn't take orders from men like Victor Hale. Jessica picked up her phone. I'm calling her now. It's late, but Rachel doesn't sleep much. She says the news doesn't keep officer hours. Rachel Torres answered on the second ring. Jessica Chen, it's been, 3 years? 4, Rachel, I need a favor. Lawyers don't ask for favors. They ask for leverage. What do you have? A video that's going to make Victor Hale very uncomfortable. Silence on the other end. Then Rachel's voice came back sharp and focused. I'm listening. Jessica talked for 12 minutes. She laid out the entire story. Daniel, the diner, the boys, Sarah, the arrest, Hale's press conference, the threatening text message, and the video. When she finished, Rachel was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. Send me the video. Are you going to run it? If it shows what you say, it shows I'm going to air it on the 11 o'clock news. That gives me 43 minutes. Rachel Hale will come after you. Hale can get in line. Send the video, Jessica. At 10:22, Jessica sent the video to Rachel Torres. At 10:31, Rachel called back. It's everything you said. We're running it. Full package. I'm cutting the segment right now. My producer is clearing the lead story. At 10:47, Sarah's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered it. Miss Mitchell? The voice was male, deep, controlled. The voice of a man who was used to giving instructions, not requests. This is Victor Hale. Sarah's blood went cold. I understand you're in a difficult situation. Hale continued. I'd like to help resolve it. Help how? I'm prepared to drop all charges against you, civil and criminal. I'll personally call the DA and the state board. Your record will be clean. Your license will be untouched. Sarah gripped the phone tighter. In exchange for what? In exchange for your silence. You sign a non-disclosure agreement. You don't speak to the media. You don't post on social media. You don't contact my son, and this all goes away. And Daniel Brooks, the veteran? What about him? Does he get an apology? Hale paused. I'm not sure what you mean. Your son assaulted a disabled Marine in a public diner. He ripped a crutch out of a veteran's hands and knocked him to the ground. Does Daniel Brooks get an apology? Miss Mitchell, my son is 18 years old. Boys make mistakes. That wasn't a mistake. That was cruelty. Hale's voice hardened. I'm offering you a way out. I suggest you take it. And I'm suggesting your son learn the difference between a mistake and a choice. He chose to humiliate a man who lost his leg defending this country, and you're choosing to protect him from the consequences. That's not love, Mr. Hale. That's cowardice. The line went dead. Sarah lowered the phone. Her hand was shaking. Jessica, Rivera, and Daniel were all staring at her. He offered me a deal, Sarah said. What kind of deal? Jessica asked. Silence for freedom. Drop the charges if I sign an NDA and disappear. Did you take it? Sarah looked at Daniel. He was gripping his crutches so hard his knuckles were white. His eyes were locked on hers. No, she said. I didn't take it. Daniel nodded, one slow, deep nod. At exactly 11 o'clock, the television in the VFW hall flickered to life. Rivera had turned it to Channel 8. The bartender cranked the volume. The old-timers in the corner put down their cards. Rachel Torres appeared on screen. Her voice was steady and urgent. Good evening. Tonight we have an exclusive report that contradicts the official account given by prominent developer Victor Hale regarding an incident at a local diner earlier today. We want to warn viewers that the following footage may be disturbing. The video played, 3 minutes and 47 seconds. Every frame crystal clear. Margaret Ellis. God bless her, had steady hands and a good phone. The diner, Daniel entering, the boys laughing. The blonde kid's voice cutting through the noise. The crutch being ripped away. Daniel falling. The blood on the floor. The entire room frozen. And then Sarah Mitchell standing up. The video showed everything. Her walking toward Daniel, helping him up, confronting the boys, the blonde kid grabbing her wrist. Sarah's controlled response. 8 seconds of precise, measured self-defense. And then the officers leading her out in handcuffs while 2 teenage bullies sat on the floor, unhurt and unaccountable. Rachel Torres came back on screen. The video you just saw was recorded by a bystander and obtained exclusively by the station. It appears to show a significantly different version of events than the one described by Victor Hale at his press conference this afternoon. We reached out to Mr. Hale's office for comment. They declined. Rivera turned off the television. The VFW hall was silent. Then the old-timer in the corner, a man in his 70s with a Korea veteran cap and a face like weathered leather, stood up from his card game. That was my war, he said. Different country, different decade, same fight. He walked to the bar, pulled out his wallet, and put $200 on the counter. That's for her legal fund, and tomorrow I'm calling every man I served with. His card partner stood up next. Vietnam veteran. He put down 100. Make it 2 of us. As Sarah watched the money pile up on the bar and pressed her hand to her mouth, her phone buzzed. Then again. Text messages, voicemails, notifications. Within 15 minutes of the broadcast, her name was everywhere. The video was being shared, clipped, reposted. A hashtag emerged, organic and furious, spreading across every platform like wildfire. I stand with Sarah. By midnight, it had been shared 40,000 times. By 1 in the morning, 100,000. Veterans were posting their own stories. Nurses were posting theirs. People who had been bullied and humiliated and silenced were speaking up for the first time because a woman in dirty scrubs had done what they wished they had had the courage to do. Sarah sat at the table in the VFW hall and read the messages until her vision blurred. Stories from strangers, stories from soldiers, stories from nurses who had worked 30-hour shifts and lost patience and kept going. Because that's what they did. That's who they were. At 1:45 in the morning, Jessica's phone rang. "It's Rachel Torres," Jessica said, looking at the screen. She answered and listened for 2 minutes without speaking. Then she hung up and turned to the table. "Victor Hale just released a statement. He's withdrawing his request for criminal charges." Rivera slapped the table. "We got him." "No," Jessica said. Her voice was careful. "We didn't get him. He's retreating, not surrendering. He withdrew the criminal complaint because the video made it untenable. But he's not dropping the civil case. And he's not backing off the licensing board." "Why?" "Because criminal charges require public evidence and a public trial. Civil cases are quieter. He can drag Sarah through years of litigation behind closed doors, bleed her dry with legal fees, and push the licensing board to act while the case is pending." Sarah felt the hope drain out of her as fast as it had arrived. "So this isn't over. This isn't over. It's just moved to a different battlefield." Sarah looked down at her hands, the hands that had packed wounds and performed CPR and held dying patients and defended a stranger in a diner. They were still steady. "Then we keep fighting," she said. At 2:15 in the morning, 39 hours after her last sleep, Sarah Mitchell finally closed her eyes. She was curled up on a couch in the back room of the VFW hall, covered with a wool blanket that smelled like mothballs and Old Glory. She dreamed of Afghanistan, she dreamed of Ruth, she dreamed of Daniel on the floor of the diner and the sound of her own chair scraping against linoleum. And somewhere in the dream, Margaret Ellis's dead son stood in a field of poppies and saluted her. Sarah woke at 6:47 Sunday morning to the sound of her phone vibrating against the wooden floor. She didn't know where she was for 3 full seconds. The ceiling was wrong. The smell was wrong. Then the VFW hall came back to her, the wool blanket, the mothball couch, the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on her chest like a stone. She reached for the phone. 14 missed calls, 89 text messages. Notifications stacked so deep the screen was just a wall of noise. One message stood out. It was from her supervisor at the hospital, Dr. Karen Wells, sent at 5:32 that morning. "Sarah, I need you to call me before you talk to anyone else. This is urgent." "Yeah." Sarah's stomach clenched. She sat up, pushed the blanket aside, and dialed. Dr. Wells answered on the first ring. "Sarah, thank God. Are you okay?" "Define okay." "I've been trying to reach you since last night. The hospital administration held an emergency meeting at 4 this morning. 4 in the morning on a Sunday. Victor Hale called the hospital board chair at midnight. He's threatening to pull his family's donations and go public with a campaign against the hospital if they don't suspend you immediately." Sarah closed her eyes. "How much does his family donate?" $2.3 million annually. They funded the new pediatric wing. His wife's name is on the building. "So they're going to suspend me." Dr. Wells paused. The pause told Sarah everything. "They already did," Sarah said. "Effective immediately, pending investigation. I fought it, Sarah. I want you to know that. I told them your record is impeccable. I told them you're the best ICU nurse I've ever worked with. I told them suspending you based on an accusation from a man whose son was just exposed on national television as a bully is insane." What did they say? They said the optics are complicated. They said they need to protect the hospital's reputation. They said it's temporary. It's never temporary. You know that. Once they suspend you, the suspension becomes the story. It becomes proof that even my own employer thinks I did something wrong. Dr. Wells was quiet for a moment. "You're right, and I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just tell me one thing. Can I come back?" "If the investigation clears you, yes. But Sarah, the investigation could take weeks, maybe months, and without pay." Without pay. The words landed like a fist. Sarah's savings account had $1,100 in it. Her rent was $1,400. Her car payment was $380. She had student loans from nursing school that she'd been paying off for 6 years. I understand, Sarah said. She didn't let her voice crack. She wouldn't give anyone that. I'm going to keep fighting on my end, Dr. Wells said. And for what it's worth, every nurse in the ICU is furious. They wanted to walk out this morning and protest. Tell them not to. The patients need them. That's exactly what I told them you'd say. Sarah hung up and sat on the edge of the couch. The VFW hall was empty except for Rivera, who was asleep in a chair near the bar, with his arms crossed and his chin on his chest. He slept the way old soldiers sleep, upright, alert, ready to move. She looked at the clock. 6:58. She had been awake for 11 minutes, and she had already lost her job. By 7:30, the team was reassembled. Daniel arrived first, moving faster on his crutches than he had the day before. Something had changed in him overnight. The hollowed-out look in his eyes was still there, but it was sharing space with something harder now. Determination. Jessica arrived at 7:45 with 2 large coffees and a legal pad covered in fresh notes. She'd been up since 5. I have news, Jessica said before she even sat down. 3 pieces. 2 good, 1 bad. Bad first, Sarah said. Victor Hale hired Martin Cross. Rivera's head snapped up. Cross, you're kidding. Who's Martin Cross? Daniel asked. The most expensive defense attorney on the East Coast, Jessica said. He's represented 2 governors, a Fortune 500 CEO, and a senator who was caught taking bribes. He doesn't lose, and he doesn't play fair. What does that mean for us? Sarah asked. It means the civil case just got 10 times harder. Cross will bury us in motions, depositions, and subpoenas. He'll drag this out until we can't afford to keep fighting. And he'll attack your character, Sarah, your military record, your divorce, your mental health, everything. Sarah's jaw tightened. My mental health. Cross's specialty is making the victim look unstable. He'll try to argue that your military service left you with PTSD, that you're prone to violent outbursts, that what happened in the diner wasn't self-defense but a traumatic episode triggered by stress. That's a lie. It doesn't have to be true. It just has to create doubt. Sarah felt something cold settle in her chest, not fear, rage. The quiet, controlled rage of a person who has spent their life saving others and is now being punished for it. What's the good news? Jessica allowed herself a small smile. First, Rachel Torres's report went viral overnight. The video has been viewed over 2 million times. Every major network has picked it up. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, all of them. Is Stand With Sarah is trending nationally. As of 30 minutes ago, an online fundraiser someone set up for your legal defense has raised over $90,000. Sarah blinked. $90,000 and climbing. Veterans groups are sharing it. Nursing organizations are sharing it. It's moving fast. Daniel leaned forward. What's the second piece of good news? Jessica opened her legal pad. I found her, the girl from Chad Hale's harassment complaint. Her name is Emily Dawson. She's 19 now. She was 16 when Chad harassed her at a school event. She filed a complaint. Victor Hale's lawyers offered her family $50,000 to withdraw it. They took the money. Will she talk? Sarah asked. She already did. I reached her last night through a mutual contact. She's been following the story. She saw the video. She cried for an hour. And then she called me back and said she's ready to go on the record. Rivera stood up. That's a game changer. It is, Jessica agreed. But there's a complication. Emily signed an NDA as part of the settlement, so she can't talk. She can't talk without risking legal action from Hale's attorneys. But here's the thing about NDAs. Jessica tapped her pen against the pad. They don't apply to testimony in legal proceedings. If Emily is subpoenaed, the NDA is void. She can testify to everything. So we need a legal proceeding, Daniel said. We need a legal proceeding. At 8:45, Sarah's phone buzzed with an incoming call. The caller ID showed a number she recognized. It was the hospital, but it wasn't Dr. Wells. Miss Mitchell, this is Gregory Thornton, Chief Legal Counsel for Mercy General Hospital. Sarah's spine straightened. She'd met Thornton once at a hospital function. He was a tall man with a permanent frown and the emotional warmth of a filing cabinet. Mr. Thornton? I'm calling to inform you that in addition to your suspension, the hospital will be conducting a formal fitness review of your employment. You'll receive official documentation by certified mail within 5 business days. A fitness review based on what? Based on conduct unbecoming of a Mercy General employee. I defended a disabled veteran from 2 assailants on my personal time outside the hospital while off duty. The hospital's code of conduct applies to employees at all times on or off duty if their actions could bring the institution into disrepute. Into disrepute, your hospital is named after a word that means compassion, and you're firing me for showing it. You're not being fired, you're being reviewed. That's the same thing with better vocabulary. Thornton's voice didn't change. You have the right to legal representation at the review. You'll be notified of the date and time. Good day, Miss Mitchell. The line went dead. Sarah put the phone down on the table. Her hands were trembling, not from fear, from the effort of not throwing the phone through the wall. Jessica touched her arm. We expected this. I know we expected it, but expecting a punch and taking one are different things. At 9:15, Jessica's phone rang. She looked at the screen and went pale. What? Rivera asked. It's Martin Cross, Victor Hale's attorney. She answered and put it on speaker. Miss Chen, the voice was smooth, practiced. The voice of a man who charged $800 an hour and was worth every penny if you were on his side. I understand you're representing Sarah Mitchell. I am. Then I'll extend you a professional courtesy. I'm filing a defamation suit against your client on Monday morning. Additionally, I'll be filing a motion to have the diner video removed from all platforms on the grounds that it was recorded without consent and distributed in violation of my client's privacy. Why? Jessica didn't flinch. Your client's son assaulted a disabled veteran in a public place. There is no reasonable expectation of privacy in a public diner. The video is protected speech, and any motion to suppress it will be denied. We'll see about that. We will. And while we're extending professional courtesies, here's one from me. I have evidence of 3 prior incidents involving Chad Hale, including a harassment case that was silenced with a settlement. If your client continues to pursue this, I will make every one of those incidents public. The line was quiet for 4 seconds. That's a bold move for a solo practitioner with no resources, Miss Chen. I have $90,000 in a legal fund that's growing by the minute. I have a video that's been viewed 3 million times and counting, and I have a client who served this country in combat and then spent 6 years saving lives in an ICU. So don't talk to me about resources, Mr. Cross. I have something your client will never have. I have the truth. Cross hung up without another word. Rivera let out a low whistle. Remind me never to cross you in court. Jessica set her phone down. Her hands were shaking, but her face was stone. He's going to come hard. The defamation suit is designed to drain us financially. He knows we can't match his resources in a prolonged legal battle. What about the fundraiser? Daniel asked. 90,000 sounds like a lot. Against Martin Cross, it's about 6 weeks. The room fell silent. Then Daniel's phone rang. He looked at the screen and frowned. It's a DC area code. Answer it, Rivera said. Daniel answered. Hello. Sergeant Brooks, my name is Congressman Robert Ellis. I represent the 7th District. Daniel looked at Rivera. His eyes were wide. Congressman, I saw the video last night. What happened to you in that diner is a disgrace. What happened to Miss Mitchell is worse. I served in the 1st Gulf War, Sergeant. Marines, 2nd Division. When I saw you on that floor, I saw every brother I ever served with. And when I saw that nurse stand up, I saw everything this country is supposed to be. Daniel's throat was tight. Sir, I appreciate that. I'm not calling to offer appreciation. I'm calling to offer action. I'm introducing a resolution on the House floor tomorrow, condemning the harassment of disabled veterans. And I'm personally requesting that the Department of Justice review the conduct of Victor Hale in connection with the suppression of prior complaints against his son. Jessica grabbed a pen and started writing furiously. Additionally, Ellis continued, my chief of staff will be reaching out to Miss Mitchell's attorney to offer whatever support my office can provide. This isn't charity, Sergeant. This is accountability. Daniel's voice cracked when he spoke. Congressman, there's a woman named Margaret Ellis who recorded the video that started all of this. She told me her son was a Marine. Corporal Brian Ellis, Helmand Province, 2010. Is he any relation to you? The line went silent for so long that Daniel thought the call had dropped. Brian was my nephew, the congressman said. His voice had changed completely. The political polish was gone. What remained was raw and human and broken. My brother's boy, he was 22. Daniel closed his eyes. Margaret is my sister-in-law, Ellis said. She didn't tell me about the video. She didn't call me. She never asked for anything. That woman buried her son and never asked the world for a single thing in return. She gave us the video because she said Brian would have wanted her to. Congressman Ellis was quiet for another moment. When he spoke again, his voice was steady but thick. Then let's make sure Brian's mother didn't do it for nothing. The call ended at 9:52. At 10:15, the first veterans began arriving at the VFW hall. It started with 3 men from the local Marine Corps League, then 5 more from the VFW chapter across town, then a group of IAD from the American Legion post on Route 9. By 11 o'clock, there were 47 veterans in the hall. By noon, 73. They came in trucks and sedans and on motorcycles. Some wore their old uniforms. Some wore ball caps with unit insignias faded by decades of sun. Some rolled in on wheelchairs. Some walked with canes. One man, 91 years old, a World War II veteran who had stormed Omaha Beach, was carried in by his grandson. They didn't come because someone organized them. There was no phone tree, no official call to action. They came because Rivera had made a few calls the night before, and those calls had turned into other calls, and those calls had turned into a movement. Sarah stood near the back of the hall and watched them file in. She couldn't speak. She pressed her hand against her mouth and breathed through it the way she did in the hospital when she lost a patient. The way she did in Afghanistan when the medevac was late, the way she always did when the world was too much and showing it was not an option. An old man in a Korean War cap walked up to her. He took her hand in both of his. His skin was thin as paper and his grip was iron. My name is Harold Kemp. I was at Chosin Reservoir, 20 below zero. We lost 400 men in 3 days. I'm 89 years old and I've been waiting my whole life to see someone do what you did. Sarah's composure broke, not dramatically, not with soothes, just one tear sliding down her left cheek, which she wiped away with the back of her hand before anyone else could see it. Thank you, sir. Don't call me sir, call me Harry, and tell me where to sign up because Victor Hale has never met a man from Chosin, and he damn sure isn't ready for one. By 1 o'clock Sunday afternoon, Jessica had assembled a war room at the VFW hall. Daniel was coordinating with veteran groups across the state. Rivera was on the phone with a retired general who wanted to write an op-ed. Margaret Ellis arrived at 1:30 with a casserole dish and the quiet dignity of a woman who understood sacrifice better than anyone in the room. Sarah pulled Margaret aside. Your nephew is Congressman Robert Ellis. Margaret looked at her. Bobby called. He's introducing a resolution in Congress tomorrow. He's asking the Department of Justice to investigate Victor Hale. Margaret set down the casserole dish and pressed both hands flat on the table. She stood there for a long moment, perfectly still. Brian would have liked that, she said finally. He always said the system was broken. He said somebody needed to fix it. He was right. He was always right. That was his problem. Margaret smiled, and the smile held 20 years of grief and pride in equal measure. At 2:45, Jessica called everyone to attention. We have 48 hours before Cross files the defamation suit. Here's what we need. 1, Emily Dawson's testimony. I've arranged for her to meet with us tomorrow morning. 2, we need to file a countersuit against Chad Hale for assault and battery against Daniel. 3, we need media coverage that keeps the pressure on. Rachel Torres is running a follow-up segment tonight. What about my nursing license? Sarah asked. The state board meets on Wednesday. You're on the agenda. I've already submitted a written response with the video evidence and a character statement. I'm going to need more character statements, as many as we can get. I'll get you 50 by tomorrow, Rivera said. From who? From every veteran in this room and every patient Sarah ever saved whose family I can track down. At 3:15, Sarah's phone buzzed again. She almost didn't look at it. She was drowning in notifications, but something made her check. It was a text from an unknown number. Not threatening this time, something else entirely. Miss Mitchell, my name is Chad Hale. I need to talk to you, please. My father doesn't know I'm sending this. I'm sorry for what I did. I know that's not enough, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. Sarah stared at the screen for a full minute. Then she showed it to Jessica. Jessica read it 3 times. Her eyes narrowed. Don't respond. He says he's sorry. It could be genuine. It could also be a trap. Cross might be using the kid to get you to say something they can use against you. Don't respond. Not yet. Sarah looked at the message again. She thought about the blonde kid's face in the diner, the emptiness in his eyes when he'd asked Daniel what it was like to be half a person. She thought about the flicker she'd seen just for a second before he laughed it away. She thought about every patient she'd ever treated who had done terrible things and still deserved compassion. She put the phone in her pocket. I won't respond, she said, but I won't delete it either. At 4 o'clock, Daniel found Sarah sitting alone on the back steps of the VFW hall. She was staring at nothing, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup that had gone cold. He lowered himself down beside her. It took effort. The steps were narrow and his crutches were unwieldy. But he made it. They sat in silence for a while. I keep thinking about what you said in the diner, Daniel finally said. What did I say? Get the pancakes. They're worth it. Sarah almost laughed. I can't believe that's what I said. I was being arrested and I gave breakfast advice. It was perfect. Daniel paused. I went back and ate them, by the way. My mom was right. They're still the same. Good. More silence, the kind that doesn't need filling. Sarah, can I tell you something? Yeah. Yesterday morning before the diner, I was sitting on my bed staring at where my leg used to be. I do that every morning. And yesterday, for the first time, I was thinking about not getting up. Not ever getting up again. I don't mean sleeping in, I mean the other thing. Sarah turned and looked at him. Her clinical training kicked in immediately, assessing, evaluating, but she pushed it down. He wasn't a patient. He was a person telling her the truth. I know what you mean, she said quietly. But then my mom called and told me to go get pancakes, and I went. And those kids did what they did, and you stood up. His voice was steady, but his eyes were not. You stood up, Sarah, when nobody else did. And I need you to know that you didn't just defend me in a diner. You gave me a reason to keep getting up. Sarah's hand found his. She didn't think about it. It just happened. The instinct of one person reaching for another across the distance that separates all human beings. Then we keep getting up, she said. Both of us, every day, no matter what. Daniel's fingers tightened around hers. Inside the VFW hall, 73 veterans were preparing for a battle that had nothing to do with foreign soil and everything to do with what this country owed the people who served it. Outside on the back steps, 2 soldiers held hands and watched the sun go down on the longest weekend of their lives. Sarah's phone sat heavy in her pocket. Chad Hale's message glowing unseen in the dark. A boy's apology, a father's war, a nurse's career hanging by a thread. And somewhere in Washington, D.C., a congressman was writing a speech about a casserole-making grandmother who had raised a Marine, buried a Marine, and saved a Marine, all without ever asking for anything in return. Monday morning hit like a freight train. Jessica was at the courthouse by 7:15, filing the countersuit against Chad Hale for assault and battery before Martin Cross could get his defamation papers through the door. She'd been up since 4, refining the language, triple-checking every citation, building a document so airtight that even an $800 an hour attorney would have to respect it. At 7:42, her phone rang. Jessica Chen, this is Martin Cross. You're calling early. I just received notice of your countersuit, assault and battery against my client. That's aggressive. That's accurate. I want to propose a meeting. Today. My office. Noon. Why, babe? Because this situation is escalating in a direction that benefits neither party. My client would like to explore a resolution. Jessica leaned against the courthouse wall and closed her eyes. She knew what this was. Cross wasn't interested in resolution. He was interested in control. A private meeting meant no cameras, no record, no witnesses. It meant pressure applied in a quiet room where Jessica would be outgunned and outnumbered. I'll be there, she said, but I'm bringing my client. That's not necessary. It is for me. Cross paused. Fine. Noon. My office. Jessica hung up and called Sarah immediately. Get dressed. We're going to war. Emily Dawson arrived at the VFW hall at 8:30. She was 19, thin, with short brown hair and the careful posture of someone who had spent years trying to make herself invisible. She sat at the table with her hands folded in her lap, and when she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "He cornered me at a school dance," she said. "Junior year. He'd been drinking. He followed me into a hallway and pushed me against a wall. He said things I don't want to repeat. When I tried to leave, he grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises." Her sat across from her. She didn't interrupt. She didn't react. She just listened the way she listened to patients in the ICU when they needed someone to hear them more than they needed medicine. "I told my parents. My dad wanted to go to the police. But then Victor Hale's lawyers showed up at our house, 3 of them, in suits that cost more than my dad's car. They said if I filed charges, they would countersue for defamation. They said they would drag my name through the media. They said no college would touch me." Emily's hands were trembling. "My mom cried for 3 days. My dad couldn't sleep. Finally, they offered $50,000. My parents took it, not because they wanted to, because they were scared." "And the NDA?" Jessica asked gently. "I signed it. I was 16 years old and I signed a piece of paper that said I could never talk about the worst thing that ever happened to me." Emily looked up. Her eyes were wet but fierce. "I've been silent for 3 years. I watched that video of what Chad did to that Marine and I threw up. Literally threw up, because it was the same thing, the same cruelty, the same entitlement, the same absolute certainty that he could do whatever he wanted and his daddy would make it disappear." She turned to Sarah. "You did what I wish someone had done for me. You stood up. So now I'm standing up. I don't care about the NDA. I don't care about the money. Let them sue me. I'll tell the truth if it costs me everything I have." Sarah reached across the table and took Emily's hand. "It won't cost you everything, I promise you that." "You can't promise that. Watch me." At 11:15, Sarah and Jessica drove to Martin Cross's office. It occupied the entire 14th floor of a glass tower downtown. The elevator doors opened onto a reception area that looked like it belonged in a museum. Everything was designed to intimidate, and Sarah knew it, and she refused to let it work. A receptionist led them to a conference room. Cross was already seated at the head of a long mahogany table. He was in his 60s, silver-haired with a face that had been shaped by decades of winning arguments and ruining people. His suit probably cost $5,000. His watch cost more. Victor Hale sat to his right. Sarah had never seen Hale in person. He was taller than she expected, broader. He carried himself with the gravity of a man who believed the world existed to accommodate him. His eyes were cold, calculating, and completely devoid of the warmth that separates authority from tyranny. "Miss Mitchell," Cross said, "please sit." "I'll stand." Cross raised an eyebrow. "As you wish. I'll get to the point. My client is prepared to drop all civil claims against you. No defamation suit, no interference with your nursing license. Complete withdrawal." Jessica didn't blink. "In exchange for what?" "In exchange for Miss Mitchell dropping her countersuit against Chad Hale, signing a mutual non-disclosure agreement, and issuing a public statement expressing regret for the incident." "Regret," Sarah repeated. "You want me to apologize?" "Not apologize. Express regret. There's a legal distinction. There's no moral distinction. You want me to say I was wrong? I want you to say you wish it had gone differently." Sarah looked at Victor Hale. He hadn't spoken yet. He sat in his chair like a king on a throne, watching the negotiations with detached amusement. "Mr. Hale," Sarah said, "can I ask you something?" Hale's eyes shifted to her. "Go ahead. When your son ripped a crutch out of a disabled veteran's hands and knocked him to the floor, were you proud of him?" The room went cold. "My son made a mistake," Hale said. His voice was measured, rehearsed. "Your son has made the same mistake at least 3 times that we know of. He harassed a 16-year-old girl, and your lawyers paid her family to shut up. He got a DUI, and the arresting officer was transferred. He got into a fight at school, and the administration buried it. At what point does a pattern of behavior stop being a mistake and start being who your son actually is?" Hale's jaw tightened. "You don't know my son." "I know what he did. I watched him call a Marine a cripple. I watched him steal a disabled man's crutch and laugh while that man bled on the floor. And I watched 40 people do nothing. So don't sit here in your $5,000 suit and tell me your son made a mistake. He made a choice. And so did you every single time you protected him from the consequences. Hale stood up. His chair scraped back hard. This meeting is over. No, Sarah said. It's not. Because here's what's going to happen. I'm not signing your NDA. I'm not expressing regret. I'm not dropping the countersuit. Instead, I'm going to walk out of this room and hold a press conference on the courthouse steps. And at that press conference, a young woman named Emily Dawson is going to tell the world what your son did to her 3 years ago. Hale's face drained of color. She can't do that, Cross said immediately. She signed a non-disclosure agreement. She signed it under duress as a minor, Jessica said. And even if it were enforceable, it doesn't cover testimony and legal proceedings, which is exactly where this is headed. So go ahead and try to enforce it, Mr. Cross. File a motion. Make a scene. It will only draw more attention to the fact that your client has spent years buying silence to protect his son from accountability. Cross and Hale exchanged a look. It lasted 3 seconds, but Sarah saw everything in it. The calculation, the fear, the dawning realization that the machinery they had always relied on was breaking down. You're making a very dangerous enemy, Hale said to Sarah. I've had enemies before, Mr. Hale. They shot at me with rifles. You're shooting at me with lawyers. Forgive me if I'm not impressed. Sarah turned and walked out. Jessica followed. Neither of them looked back. The press conference happened at 2 o'clock on the courthouse steps. Emily Dawson stood at the microphone. Her hands shook. Her voice cracked on the first sentence. But she kept going. She told her story from beginning to end. The school dance, the hallway, Chad's hands on her arms, the bruises she photographed and saved on a thumb drive her parents didn't know about, the lawyers in expensive suits standing in her family's kitchen, the money, the silence. She spoke for 11 minutes. When she finished, there were reporters crying. Cameramen who had covered wars were wiping their eyes. Daniel stood behind Emily the entire time. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He stood there on his crutches in his USMC cap, a living testament to what courage looked like. Sarah stood beside him. Rivera stood beside her. Margaret Ellis stood at the edge of the crowd holding a framed photograph of her son against her chest. By 3 o'clock, Emily's statement had been broadcast on every major network. By 4, the hashtag #IStandWithSarah had been joined by a new one. I stand with Emily. By 5, 3 more women had come forward with their own stories about Chad Hale. Different incidents, different years, the same pattern. At 5:30, Martin Cross released a statement on behalf of Victor Hale. All civil claims against Sarah Mitchell were being withdrawn. The family would not be pursuing further legal action. At 5:45, the district attorney's office announced that criminal charges against Sarah Mitchell were formally dropped. Simultaneously, they announced that an investigation had been opened into Chad Hale for multiple counts of assault. Jessica read the announcement out loud to the team at the VFW hall. The room erupted. 70 veterans on their feet, cheering some of them, crying Harry Kemp from Chosen Reservoir, pounding his cane on the floor so hard it shook the tables. Sarah didn't cheer. She sat in her chair and pressed her hands flat on the table and breathed. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. It wasn't over. She knew that, but the worst of it was. Wednesday morning, the state nursing board hearing. Sarah walked into the hearing room at 9 o'clock. Jessica was beside her. Daniel sat in the gallery. Rivera was there. Margaret, Emily, Harold Kemp. 47 veterans who had driven from across the state to fill every seat in the room. The board consisted of 5 members, 3 women, 2 men. They sat behind a long table and looked at Sarah with expressions that ranged from sympathetic to skeptical. The chairwoman, a retired nurse named Dr. Patricia Owens, opened the proceedings. Miss Mitchell, this board has received a complaint alleging conduct unbecoming of a licensed nurse. You have the right to respond. Would you like to make a statement? Sarah stood. She didn't bring notes. She didn't need them. I've been a nurse for 6 years. Before that, I was a combat medic for 3. In those 9 years, I have performed CPR over 200 times. I have held patients' hands while they died. I have told families the worst news of their lives and then gone back to work because there were other patients who needed me. I have worked shifts so long I forgot what day it was. I have skipped meals, skipped, sleep, skipped, holidays, skipped, my own wedding anniversary. And I did it because nursing isn't a job. It's a calling. And I answered it. She paused. Last Saturday, I walked into a diner after a 31-hour shift. I watched two teenagers bully a disabled Marine. I watched one of them rip his crutch away and knock him to the floor. I watched 40 people do nothing, and I decided I couldn't be the 41st. I stood up. I helped him. When one of the boys grabbed my wrist, I defended myself using training I received in the United States Army. I used the minimum force necessary. Neither boy was injured, but I was arrested. I was suspended from my job. I was threatened by a billionaire. And now I'm standing here defending my right to be a nurse because I refused to look away when someone was being hurt. Her voice didn't waver. Her eyes didn't drop. If this board decides that what I did disqualifies me from nursing, then I will accept that decision. But I want you to know something. I would do it again tomorrow, next week, every single time, because the oath I took doesn't expire when my shift ends. The oath I took as a medic and the oath I took as a nurse both say the same thing: do no harm. But they also mean something else. Do not allow harm when you have the power to stop it. She sat down. The room was silent for 10 seconds. Then Dr. Owen spoke. Is there anyone here who would like to speak on Miss Mitchell's behalf? Daniel stood up first. He made his way to the front on his crutches, and when he turned to face the board, his eyes were clear. My name is Daniel Brooks, Sergeant, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines. I lost my left leg to an IED in Fallujah in 2019. Last Saturday, I lost something worse. I lost my faith that anyone in this country still cared about people like me. Sarah Mitchell gave it back. He sat down. Dr. Karen Wells stood up next. She'd come from the hospital despite pressure not to. I've supervised Sarah Mitchell for 4 years. She is the finest nurse I have ever worked with. Her patient outcomes are in the top 2% of our entire ICU. She has received more commendations from patients' families than any nurse in our department's history. Suspending her was a mistake driven by fear, not by facts. Harold Kemp stood up, 89 years old, chosen reservoir. I don't know much about nursing boards, but I know about courage. I've seen it on frozen hills in Korea, and I saw it in a diner last Saturday. This woman is a warrior. And warriors don't stop being warriors because someone in a suit tells them to. One by one, they stood. Veterans, nurses, patients' families. Emily Dawson, who spoke about what it meant to finally have someone believe her. Margaret Ellis, who spoke about her son and what he would have wanted. 31 people testified. The hearing lasted 4 hours. At 1:15 in the afternoon, the board returned from deliberation. Dr. Owens read the decision. The board finds no evidence of conduct unbecoming of a licensed nurse. All complaints are dismissed. Miss Mitchell's license remains in full standing. The room broke open. Cheering, crying, Harry Kemp's cane pounding the floor again. Rivera's hand on Sarah's shoulder. Daniel's arms around her crutches, and all holding on like she was the only solid ground in a shifting world. Sarah pressed her face into Daniel's shoulder and let herself cry. Not the controlled, single tear wiped away kind. Real crying. The kind she hadn't allowed herself since Afghanistan. The kind that comes from a place so deep it doesn't have a name. She cried for Ruth, who had dared holding her hand. She cried for the 19-year-old on the motorcycle who never got to say goodbye. She cried for Emily, who had been silent for 3 years. She cried for Margaret's son, who came home in a flag-draped box. She cried for Daniel, who had sat on the edge of his bed that Saturday morning, wondering if he should get up. And she cried for herself. For the first time in years, she let herself matter. Thursday morning, Sarah returned to Mercy General Hospital. Not because anyone asked her to, because her patients needed her. She walked through the ICU doors at 6:55, 5 minutes before her shift. The nurses at the station saw her first, then the doctors, then the orderlies. Nobody said a word. Then a nurse named Priya, who had worked beside Sarah for 3 years and never once told her how much she admired her, started clapping. One person, slow, steady claps that echoed down the hallway. Then another nurse joined, then a doctor, then a janitor who had watched Sarah hold a dying man's hand at 3 in the morning and never forgot it. The entire ICU floor was applauding. Dr. Wells met her at the nursing station. Her eyes were red. Welcome back, Mitchell. Good to be back, Dr. Wells. You've got 4 patients, Bed 2 is a post-op cardiac. Bed 5 is a respiratory failure on a vent. Bed 7 is a new admission, motorcycle accident, 23 years old. And bed 9 is an elderly woman, 91 end stage. Her family is with her. Sarah picked up her tablet and logged in. Her hands were steady. Her mind was clear. "I'll start with bed 9, she said. "The family needs someone right now." She walked down the hall, scrubs, clean badge, clipped to her chest, and pushed open the door to room 9. An elderly woman lay in the bed, frail and fading. Her daughter sat beside her, holding her hand, terrified. Sarah pulled up a chair. "Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm going to be your nurse today. I'm going to take care of her, and I'm going to take care of you too." The daughter looked at her with eyes full of fear and hope, and the desperate need to trust someone. "Thank you," she whispered. Sarah took the old woman's hand. It was thin and cool like paper, like Ruth's had been. "I'm right here," Sarah said. "I'm not going anywhere." 2 weeks later, Congressman Ellis's resolution passed the House with bipartisan support. The Department of Justice opened a formal investigation into Victor Hale's pattern of witness intimidation and suppression of complaints. Chad Hale pleaded guilty to misdemeanor assault and was sentenced to 200 hours of community service at a veterans rehabilitation center where he would spend the next year looking into the eyes of men and women who had given what he never could. The online fundraiser for Sarah's legal defense closed at $412,000. After legal fees, Sarah donated the remainder to a new foundation she and Daniel created together. They called it Stand Up, and its mission was simple legal aid for veterans and first responders who faced retaliation for doing the right thing. Daniel got his prosthetic refitted. He started volunteering at the VA hospital 3 days a week. He stopped sitting on the edge of his bed in the morning staring at the place where his leg used to be. He still woke up early, but now he got up. Margaret Ellis hung the framed photograph of her son next to a new photograph on her living room wall. It showed Sarah Daniel Rivera, Jessica Emily, and Margaret herself standing on the courthouse steps on the day the nursing board cleared Sarah's name. In the photograph, Margaret was smiling. It was the first photograph of her smiling since 2010. And every Saturday morning without fail, Sarah Mitchell walked into Grayson's diner, sat down at the counter, and ordered the pancakes. Linda always had them ready, because some things in this world are still worth standing up for. And some people, the ones who serve, the ones who heal, the ones who refuse to look away, those people deserve to know that when they fall, someone will be there to help them back to their feet. Sarah Mitchell was that someone, and she always would be.